this session, when we were planning it, Confessions of a Screen Scraper. And I didn't think terribly hard when I was doing that about whether that's a term that translates very well into other languages. Obviously, growing up with English as my first language, I completely forget other languages even exist. I could almost be American like that. But I, unlike Americans, I do know other languages exist and other ways of writing dates and times too. But this is basically looking at different ways we can get data using PowerShell that really wasn't designed for us to fetch it. So that's what I'm going to look at. You'll have seen this slide lots of times. We are very, very grateful to our sponsors, but I think we are now on the fourth day. We are now labouring the point if I name check them all. So thank you very much, all of our sponsors. We really are grateful, but I think everybody's heard it now. As for me, I worked for Microsoft when PowerShell first came out. I escaped from Microsoft at the end of 2010. I keep making the same joke that it was like being married to a beautiful psychopath for 10 years. And eventually that joke will wear thin, but I keep making it. And I've been working freelance for about the last 10 years or so. And I'm hoping to retire by the end of the year. So that's where I am. And that will actually give you a little clue about one of the things that comes up on the next slide. I've worked on quite a few interesting modules. So the first version of Hyper-V support for PowerShell was my doing. I did a lot for Doug Fink's Import Excel module, and we'll see quite a bit of that in this, and a couple of other modules that are popular on the thing, on the PowerShell gallery. So, a bit like the entrance to the first Star Wars film a long time ago in a place far, far away. I do wonder how many of you were born after 1991. Because I've been doing this since before you were born, and that's really worrying. It's also worrying that Excel's been around for that long, and I've been using Excel for that long. I first used Excel in 1989, and you apply for a job, and people say, "Oh, how much experience of Excel have you got?" And you say, "Well, over 30 years." And they kind of go, "You can't have." And I go, "Yes, Excel 1 was only on the Mac. Excel 2 came out for Windows version 2. But there was a Windows version 2? Yes, I worked on Windows version 1 and then on Windows version 2. So, but I wrote some Excel macros. The company I was working for at the time, we had a big materials management system with all our costs in it. And I needed to know the costs of particular configurations of computer that we were selling. So I got the part numbers for the machines I was interested in. I had them in a spreadsheet. I had an Excel macro that did send keys to a terminal emulator. It waited for the screen to come up, copied the whole screen, put the whole screen in Excel, jiggled about the right cells in Excel, found the bits that it wanted, plonked it in another spreadsheet or another page of the sheet, and my boss loved it because he was then able to say, "Oh, the machines that I've sold actually cost this much and they've underpaid my commission." So that became very popular. And he was the one that introduced me to the term screen scraping for doing this stuff with a terminal emulator. So lots of time has passed. And this decade and the last decade, we've obviously got lots and lots of data available online. We've got some really good tools in PowerShell for getting data. Invoke web request and invoke REST method get used a lot. They've actually had a couple of little improvements that aren't very widely shouted about in version 7 compared with what we had in PowerShell 5. Some of you, no, probably none of you would have come to my regular expressions session and then come back for a second dose of my presentation. But I did do a fill-in session on regular expressions earlier in the week, and regular expressions are great if you've got no choice but to go and get the page and then chainsaw it apart like I was doing with those Excel macros. It's better if we can avoid using lots of regular expressions. I'm going to show you an example of carving up a page, but I'm not going to use regular expressions for that. I'm going to use some HTML parsing. I mentioned Doug Fink's Excel module. With Import Excel, Doug's put a load of other little utilities in, one of which is called Get HTML Table. And you can basically say, go to this page, find the third table on the page and export it, and I want that then brought into Excel. And I've kind of cannibalized some of that code for other things, one of which I'll show you. We've got a lot of supported APIs for going and getting data, but they're no fun. I'm interested in the APIs that aren't properly supported in this session, because you can go and get the documentation for how to call a supported API. How do you reverse engineer calling APIs that are there, that are serving you, that were put there for you to use, but not necessarily in the way that you want to use them? And that's what we're going to look at. Now, obviously, I've got one session where I'm supposed to leave room for questions, and I've already used 7 minutes of it. So I'm not going to be able to give you the complete end-to-end, but I can give you some really good pointers. And I'm still sending lots of that data to Excel. Some things don't change. So different kinds of screen scraping. The first one, I just keep all the things that Windows Spotlight sends me. That's not really screen scraping, but I like to hang on to the data. That map was electric vehicle charge points that have been vandalized. You got my home electricity coming up, somewhere disappearing in the background. We had a load of Formula One results. I have got a spreadsheet with every Formula One result from the very first Grand Prix up until the point where we stopped actually following the rules for Formula One in 2021. All that is tucked away in one spreadsheet. And then I'm going to show you, as part of the second demo I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the carving up HTML pages to get the data that I'm missing for that. There's data in there to do with my car, some of which we'll see. And before I came down here, I actually went and refreshed this page. This is calling Volkswagen's API. Anybody here drive a Volkswagen? Must be some people. Any of you use the Volkswagen app? Okay, Volkswagen have an app, and from the app you can do things like, if you've got an electric car, you can turn it on to preheat, you can lock the car remotely, it'll tell you where the car is, stuff like that. That's where my car is right now. You can see when it was parked, which is a bit odd because I was here when they parked it. It had actually moved across the airport and come back again. I asked for it to be washed while I left it there, and I think they took it to the other side of the airport to wash it because I can see it going and coming back. What you can also see is, I said you can put the car on to preheat and cool down. Despite what it reckoned the outside temperature was at the time, I'd forgotten to tell it not to warm up for leaving home in the morning. So apparently it had the heating on at 6:30 UK time this morning, which reminds me I need to turn that off when I go back. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm interested in getting. Okay, Volkswagen make this information available, and this particular set of information, there's a lot of stuff published by people who do home automation stuff about what you can call from the Volkswagen API. So I didn't have to reverse engineer this. I just went and found other people's work and said, okay, I can translate that to PowerShell. And one or two little hiccups with the login process that I'll probably talk about before we're through. Just before I leave maps, I've got a fascination with maps. This was getting some data about where all the electric vehicle charge points are in Britain and mapping that to how many charge points are there per mile of major road. Okay, so not where the people are, but where the roads are. So you can see this particular area of Wales, we've hardly got any charge points per mile of road. And over here, we've got lots of charge points per mile of road. So that's kind of interesting statistics. Some of that data is published officially, and some of it I have to resort to screen scraping to get, because the some of the operators do not follow their legal obligations to publish this stuff. So that's kind of setting the scene. Let's go back into the slide deck. So this is data that's already presented to us. I'm not here trying to say, oh yeah, you can hack into people's systems and get data out that was supposed to be private. Yeah, occasionally you do find stuff that they didn't intend to publish, but that's not the purpose of it. And we're trying to be fairly respectful of the services that we're talking to, so not hitting them with thousands and thousands and thousands of requests. I have been called a one-man denial of service attack before, but I'm not trying to do that here. There are occasions where who's really thorough about reading terms and conditions on websites? Good. So you don't know if you're breaking the terms and conditions, right? The people whose website it is don't expect you to read them. You don't read them. You might be breaking them. We'll just put that to one side for a little bit. Okay. If that troubles you, now would be a good time to kind of go and find another session. And really, we can divide what we're getting in two different ways. Either it's machine readable, which almost always means JSON format. Occasionally you talk to a service and it can send back CSV data. Occasionally you talk to a service and it sends back XML data. But more than 90% of it is JSON format. Or it's HTML format, it's set up for people to read, and we've got to try and break that data up. And then we've got the other split is, can we just make a straightforward call with invoke REST method and nothing else? Or have we got to manage sessions? Have we got to send particular headers? Does that connection need particular cookies? Depending on what you're talking to, there's one photography site. I thought about showing that site, but quite a lot of the content on it goes under the not quite safe for work heading. So I thought if I tried to demonstrate that, I'd probably get something that was inappropriate popping up on screen. So I parked that one. But their logon is driven entirely by cookies. So you go to the logon page, you get a form back, you put the credentials on the form, you submit the form, all of which is done using the stuff that's there in the two PowerShell commandlets, and then you've got a cookie which allows you then to do whatever you need to do for the duration of that session. You can add a second cookie to that to actually put filtering on so that they don't hide the stuff that isn't entirely safe for work. So sometimes you want to put that cookie in, sometimes you don't. So that's one version. But I want to start with a really trivial one. The trivial one is over here. It's a company called ZapMap, and they do mapping of where to find electric vehicle charge points. But they're also, they know more about this stuff than just about anybody else in Britain, and they get used by the government to produce various reports. So here's a really nice graph that they did, and I'd like to refer to this graph in some documents that I'm writing. So I can sit there with pen and paper and go, okay, so for each of these brackets, for each of these years, the number of charge points was this. But if I just do an inspect on this page, and just to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to just use the Windows magnifier. If I come down here, you can see that in the middle of that page, there's a reference to docs.google.com, spreadsheets. So if I copy and paste that, and let's just come back out of magnifier, because otherwise it's going to look a little bit strange. If I copy and paste that in, there's the Google Doc for the graph. And ZapMap are by no means alone in doing this, but then I can go File, Download, and now I've got that data, and I've got the different pages of what they've used. They've put all the graphs for this particular page, for this report on growth of vehicle charging, into one Google Doc for me, which I think is really, really nice of them. You have to be aware when you do this that sometimes people leave stuff in there that's not intended to be in there, and you don't go and embarrass them by anything that you find. In the case of this particular one, there isn't anything that I have to worry about in there. They've almost said, yeah, anybody can have this data if you figure out how to get it. So that was quite an easy one. And as you can see, no need to log in, no need to even write any PowerShell for that one. It was just, there it is, ready for me. And that was just inspecting the elements on the web page. So the next one I'm going to look at is the one I mentioned before about Formula One results. So contributors to Wikipedia are very good at putting the results up as they happen. We don't need to log in to get the data, but there's no API to get Formula One results from Wikipedia. There are some sites where you can get this data, but they're usually subscription sites. And what I've found is that some of the APIs that have existed change more frequently than the regulations in F1 do. So actually, those sites were not terribly good. And part of the reason I stopped and have now picked this up again was the difficulty of continuing to use the site that I was using. That needed an absolute ton of regular expressions to break up the pages, because every results page seemed to be different from every other one. Wikipedia is fairly consistent, but it's not completely consistent. So let me show you. Oh, just before I leave that, there is a package that I'm using for this called PowerHTML. So I'm not using regular expressions to do this. I'm using PowerHTML. So let's leave the slide behind. So here's the page for this year's World Championship. What we can see is we've got quite a few tables. There's one there with the teams, one on drivers who only drove in free practice, which doesn't appear on every year's championship page. Then we've got one with the dates, which is useful because I'm going to want that later. And then we've got one where, keep going, where we've got the reports of the races. Okay. Now, if I just go very quickly to one report, on that report, down here, we've got not quite the last table is the race classification. And then a bit further up, we've got qualifying. Those are the main tables. But if I go to the following race, those of you who follow F1 will know that some meetings have sprint races. So this has got a different number of tables. We've got qualifying for the sprint race and the result of the sprint race, and then qualifying for the main race and classification for the main race. So what I've got to do to parse this data is I've got to take the years page, figure out where on the years page the dates and the reports links are, and then go and get the reports and find the last table that's got a position column. So this column here, in fact, I looked for the laps column, not the position column, but the last table on this page that has got the right columns in is the data that I want. So in PowerShell, that looks a bit like this. And it's not the world's simplest PowerShell, but also it's only one screen full. And of course, nobody's going to believe me if I just say, well, that's all there is to it. So what I'm going to do, and since I always send this stuff to Excel, I'm just going to fetch that while I explain it. So you can see I'm counting down from 2025 to 2022. I'm looking for that year's World Championship. And can I zoom a little? Oh, I reckon I probably can. And let's hide that at the left. So you can see that this is the... Let's come back up a second. This is the piece from Power HTML. Okay, convert to HTML. It obviously worked there. Convert to HTML basically lets me access the elements in the page with something very like XPath, if you know XPath. I don't believe this is absolutely correct XPath in all instances, but we can basically say, go and find the reports tables, go and find the date tables, and then we can hold the URLs, the race names, and the dates in a set of hash tables, and then for each race, we go and get its page, we go and find the right table, we extract the columns and rows from that table, and then we attach the date and the race name. So back here in Excel, here we've got the results. We're working back from 2025, but you can see we've got the results of the Australian Grand Prix and the Chinese Grand Prix, and where are we up to now? We've had the Monaco Grand Prix and the Spanish, and we just had the Canadian. So that's up to date as of a couple of weekends ago. And then we've got last year's and going all the way down to 2022. So that was not that difficult once you can figure out this is what I need to go and look for. Okay. So that's one nice, fairly simple example. Obviously, for suitable definitions of simple. Now, I did a session yesterday where I was talking about using classes to do various tricks, and one of the things I was using in that was something that gets information for railway stations. And the railway station data, he says, over here, I can do something like, let's zoom this as well before anybody asks me, I can do something like, wrong screen, get station board. Pad is the code for Paddington Station, and this time I'm going to let it produce the details. So, in fact, let's make that a fraction smaller so we can see the detail a bit better. These are the next few departures from Paddington Station. The thing is, you need to know the 3-letter codes for the stations. And there's an API to get this information. What there isn't is a nice, easy API to get the list of stations. So here, just going to pause that. I decided to record this because it's much easier to talk over it than it is to do it live and explain what I'm doing. So here is a page that National Rail have where you can search for information about a station. So I've started typing in London, and immediately the developer tools, so in the browser you can press F12 and toggle these tools at the bottom. And I've just lost something that I wanted to show you in the next piece. That wasn't very clever, but never mind. I hope that will still have what I need if I leave it long enough. But these tools allow you to say, give me a network trace, you can filter it down to particular things and you can search in it. So here I can see that it's looked for a page called L. One of those has returned no bytes, but one of them has returned 50k bytes. I don't know if that's probably quite hard to read at that font. But what I can do then is I can drill into that and say, go on, click on that. Oh, I can also do copy it to PowerShell, and we'll see that in a second. I'm not going to drill into it. I've just done the copy to PowerShell. No, I did drill into it. You'd think I'd remember what was in my own video. The other thing with that is if you double click on the link, it gives you an error. So when I come around to PowerShell, I can paste this into PowerShell. And why do I think I've got the unedited video here? I can pare this down from what the copy operation gave me. So I can shorten this a bit. Okay, if I try just that on its own, I get that same error. Okay, so I know that I need some of the stuff that it was sending. So I can narrow this down, and I can keep narrowing it down. And eventually I get to the minimum set of what do I need to send. And I can then see that it's coming back as JSON. So you see I can now see I've switched from using invoke web request to invoke REST method. And now I can see that what's coming back has actually got JSON in it that I can see and process. So it's quite easy to go from there. He says, we do not want that. It is quite easy to go from there to saying, put that in export station list as a function. So that's exactly the same code that you just saw in the piece I was refining. And now I can just run that and run it for each letter of the alphabet and get the station list as a series of short pages. So that's the first example of actually doing a proper screen scrape where we've gone and found the information from the browser tools. Some quick learnings from that. The first is the browser tools really are your friend. You can look for the size of the file. You can look for particular kinds of requests that are going. Even dig around inside packets. Do a search to see if a particular thing that you see in one packet has been returned by another packet, been returned by another exchange with the server. That case with the railway information, it needed this header that was origin. It will not work without the origin header. And it's just a question of trial and error to find out what these magic strings are. Sometimes when you don't have to log in, you still have to send the right magic string. And the next thing to look at is logging on. Now, I was saying about the Volkswagen. Volkswagen have an API that a very limited number of people are allowed to talk to. So my energy company can talk to the car and say, start charging now. Electricity is cheap at the moment. And it can say, if the car decides it's going to start charging by itself, it can say, no, wait for a bit because I'm going to tell you to charge later on. There's another company called Tronity who get logbook information from the car. So they can get a list of all the journeys it's made, every time it's been charged, one or two other things. It's a really cheap service to subscribe to. I think it's €5 so it comes out about £4 a month. And they've got some downloads, but they don't quite let me download everything that I want. And I've got another one of those little videos, if I can find it. So here, I've actually put in some bogus credentials. Okay, I just want you to realise I've put in some bogus credentials here. And the Tronity webpage, let's get the magnifier on this one, because otherwise it's just, oh, not you. Sometimes, there we go. So down here, you can see the page that we've called is called Authentication. And the payload it sent a piece of JSON with a field that says james@outlook.com. Grant type is password. And then the password is, this is not my password. Okay, so it sent that. And if I let this run on, he says, window minus. So if I let that carry on a second, you can see there is the URL it's called. It's come back with an unauthorized error. And now I'm just going to seamlessly pretend that we've gone to the right password without showing you what it is. Come on. So now Authentication has come back and it sent me an access token. Okay, so over here is an access token, and that I need to send to any subsequent request I make. It's also sent me a refresh token, and it said the refresh token, or this access token, will run out in 3600 seconds. At that point, you need to go and get yourself a new one. So let's no. Some days I actually closed media player. How did I do that? Right, back we go. So there's the failed one. Here's the successful one coming up. And after that, we can actually go and have a look and examine that token in PowerShell. Now, just up here, we'll see this actually when I go round to show you the code in PowerShell in a minute. But up here, we've got a class that we've loaded that sometimes you have to go and look for the DLLs to actually be able to load this class. But this class breaks the access token up. Now, I don't want you to dwell too deeply on what the access token breaks up to, except down at the bottom here, we've got valid from, valid to, and my user ID. And the user ID is conveniently hidden behind the control bar in Media Player. But here, again, let's just zoom in. It's said, that's my user ID, go and find vehicles that relate to me. And over on this side, it's got details of my car. I've blurred out the critical information, so you can't go looking for my car. But it's able to get the information about my car from there, and then we can start doing other interesting things with that data. Now, the one thing that I was hoping I was going to be able to show you is, let's close that. If I go and get a different page in here, let's go, that's charges, so let's go to trips. Oh, good. Down here, I said about the token expiring. This page actually is doing the refresh operation. So by leaving this and forcing it to refresh, I can see what I have to send from my piece of PowerShell. So let's come out of there and there. So over here, this is the code that actually does the work to get the data from Tronity, and you can see that I'm getting doing this operation to get the access token, finding out the user ID and storing it, checking when it's valid too, and then I've written a whole series of functions to get the user, get the vehicle, call all the different APIs that I could see in the developer tools in my browser, and basically write some PowerShell functions. So that's the last few trips that the car has made. And you can see that I've even gone as far as making these clickable links. So I can go control click on that. He says control click on that. And we should have a view of where the car was when it finished that journey, or when it started that journey from the column I clicked on. So that is just getting that data that I could see in the browser. Now, there's one last trick here, which is I've kind of come to call this the "we don't need no stinking apps" approach. So what we've seen there is a basic pattern for getting data where we've got an access token. I've talked about where we need cookies. I've also talked about where we don't authenticate at all. But some things only work from an app. You haven't got a web page to access them. And what I found was almost all apps, there are a few exceptions to this, you can use something like Fiddler, which works as an HTTPS, I can't get the letters in the right order now, proxy. So it creates one secure tunnel between the client and itself. It creates another between itself and the server, and it shows you what's in the middle. A few apps, like the Volkswagen app, go, hang on a minute, that's the wrong certificate for the server I'm talking to, and won't play ball. I haven't tried this with any banking apps, but I very much hope that banking apps do that. There are a few others that do time-based tokens, so that you can't pretend you're the app. But most of the time, it's just like using the browser tools. And just a very quick one to show you this. Here's what Fiddler looks like. So he says, here's what Fiddler looks like. Too quick there. Come back. So we've got all the packets. This first one is getting the first page of data, and the second one is getting subsequent pages of data. And up here, you can see this is the data that we actually send. And then it's the same process as before. Take that into PowerShell, refine it, pare it down. So you can see I'm going to start making this into an invoke. And eventually, I get something that looks like that, just as I've refined it and refined it. Yes, I've had to steal their API key. Naughty me. But remember, this is data this company is making public, so I don't feel bad about stealing their API key. So there you saw the process for working out how to get it. And as the very last thing to show you, if I go here and run this, their API key, so that's the API key you just saw, that's the URL you just saw, and this will go and get their data. It comes in several pages. And that's the actual data ready for me to do something interesting with it. I think I can format it and just show you the latitude, longitude, and name. So that's what I'm actually seeing to get that information. So that's gone from sort of, wow, I could just find a link that you'd embedded in a page, through using the developer tools, through to sniffing stuff off the network in 30 minutes. I did say we weren't going to cover every possible way of doing this, but as per usual, I have used just about all the question time, but we have 3 minutes left for questions if anybody would like to throw any at me. Yes. This is built. I don't know whether it is part of the Chromium engine or whether it's an add-on for Edge specifically, but I've seen it in more places than Edge. It does seem to be standard, and it's basically you've got copy part of the text, copy all of the text, and then copy it for various utilities. You might have seen, as well as PowerShell curl was there. And so you can extract what's there and say, run it in the tool of my choice. But somebody had the really lovely idea of making PowerShell one of those choices. So there's nothing to add. You just, I'm just using out of the box Windows 11, so I've never put. I have a bit of a down on Google, so I don't tend to put Chrome on machines, but it is there in other browsers. Any others? Well, thank you then. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying.